Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for this latest Rootwurks webinar, What You Need for an Effective Sanitation Program in Food Manufacturing. My name is Ben Hartman. I'm the content manager here at Rootwurks, and I'll be your host for this webinar today. So as you know, in the food manufacturing industry, all types of things can go wrong if you don't have good sanitation methods in place, good sanitation program. It can lead to contamination, potentially recalls, which can cost millions of dollars. And that's even if nobody actually gets hurt. If there's people harmed, you can even potentially face, criminal charges. And so definitely things that any company needs to avoid. And one of the best ways is to practice proper sanitation. But what that entails and what you need to do is a whole other matter. And to make sense of all that, we've got an expert here with us today. So we'll go ahead and introduce him. We got David Blomquist, the president and founder of DFB Consulting, LLC. David previously served in senior technical affairs roles for Ecolab for more than 2 decades and was the vice president of Q&A and R&D for Sunstate Dairy. Also, he and his wife run Creative Confectionaire, which sells wholesale caramel corn in the Twin Cities area. So definitely check that out. Hi, David. Thanks for being here.
Howdy. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm pretty good.
Lovely. Well, let's hope it stays that way. I don't see any reason it wouldn't. So I thought I'd just ask, just open-ended here, but what is the general goal of sanitation? How would you sum that up?
Well, what you're trying to do is remove all the unwanted food material that's in your, from the surfaces of equipment. You want to remove the soils from the equipment, and you want to eliminate pathogenic bacteria in the processing area, and also eliminate it and control the spoilage organisms in the environment.
Mm-hmm. And what happens? I mean, I guess, we touched upon it somewhat in the intro in terms of recalls and fines and things like this that can happen. What would you say are the consequences when somebody doesn't have these sort of systems in place?
Well, first of all, let's just take it from the very basic side of it. You're going to have spoilage. You're going to get customer complaints. If your product doesn't look and taste the same way from every time that they get it, that they eat it, they're going to say, "What's the matter with this?" And there can be foreign material. If you go from product A to product B and don't have a good clean in between, and you're buying product A and you get product B, people are not going to be happy. But the worst thing would be something like undeclared allergens, where you would maybe cause somebody to have a serious reaction or even die. Or worse is pathogenic bacteria, whether it be Salmonella, Listeria, or any of the other pathogenic bacteria that can be in food products.
Mm-hmm. So beyond the actual the risks such as allergens and different types of contaminants, there's also just in terms of the quality of the product and the consistency, in other words.
Absolutely.
So you want to make sure that they get the same experience every time.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned when we were speaking earlier about the general sanitation process. How would you describe how that works and what that is?
Well, in general, what you're trying to do is remove the soils. It's important to get everything rinsed off and remove the soils. You rinse and then you wash, and that includes using a chemical that is added to your solution, a cleaning solution that will remove whatever soil that you've got there. Then you rinse it again, and finally use sanitize to kill the bacteria that might be left.
Mm-hmm. How much does somebody need to? I mean, somebody actually needs to know a lot about chemicals or whatnot, or is it pretty straightforward?
Well, it depends upon how sophisticated your operation is. You don't need to be a chemist, but you do need to understand what soils you're dealing with and what chemistry removes them. For example, if you're dealing with most simple sugars, just sugar, water takes that off. But if you've got a a protein in there, then you've got to have an alkaline cleaner with a probably a chlorine or some oxidizer in there. If you've got a mineral, it'd probably take an acid. And there are other soils that require different types of chemistry to remove it.
Mm-hmm. So how does somebody determine what they need?
Well, work with your chemical supplier. They will be able to tell you what of their products remove what soils. There's chemical. There are soil identification kits, and they will tell you what soils remove. And you need to set up your cleaning programs. You need to have, for each piece of equipment, for each area, you need to have a detailed list that steps of what it takes to get it clean. And are you in an area that requires water, or are you in an area like a bakery, for example, where you probably don't want to get a lot of water? In your flour bin, for example, if you've got a bakery, you better not get any water in there, because you're in trouble if you do.
Mm-hmm.
And write a procedure that details what it is. That's called an SSOP. And train your employees on how to use it.
So what would you say, I guess, in terms of kind of like first steps that somebody can take that you've seen people use or that have been effective? And I guess I'm picturing maybe smaller or maybe more mid-sized companies that maybe don't have a whole lot of manpower there, or they're where they don't have enough time or to get everything done maybe the way they do, or that they need to, or they're sort of like, I guess some good tips that you kind of have to make it easier.
Well, first of all, don't be afraid to scrub. You need to make sure that you get mechanical action on there. I mean, there are 4 basic parts of the sanitation. You've got time, temperature, concentration, mechanical action. And you're trying to get it done quickly. So maybe you if you've got a kettle, you raise the temperature in there. You have you turn on the heat, turn on the steam, whatever your heat is, and you increase the concentration of your cleaner, and that can help. The mechanical action is the scrubbing. If you have the ability to take a brush and scrub it, that will help you. And so some of the basic things that you need to do are included in that.
So on some level, it's also just like a little elbow grease, I guess. Just get down there and get after it.
Yeah. Now, in other cases, you won't be able to use elbow grease. For example, in a pipeline, if you've got that would be clean in place, CIP, and there you have to have a lot stronger chemistry that will dissolve the soils. You have to have enough flow rate to give you the mechanical action to get turbulent flow in those pipelines. And temperature has to be a lot higher than it would be for manual cleaning, probably in, to pick some numbers, maybe 160 to 180 F. And, so those are some of the factors that are involved with that.
Mm-hmm. So what have you seen, I guess, in audits or visiting companies that are really doing a great job at it? What are some things that I guess they kind of all have in common? Or they're not, I wouldn't say like shortcuts, but kind of little techniques that kind of make things easier, but also more thorough?
Well, they have a checklist. They have training. If you've got a 1 or 2 person employee, 1 or 2 person shop, everybody needs to be doing everything. But if you've got 10 or 20 employees, each employee has to know what their responsibilities are and how to clean their particular area of the facility.
Mm-hmm. So in other words, it's not just okay, everybody get out there and straighten things up. It's more I guess keeping records and checklists of saying like, okay, this person does this on this day, and then everybody can kind of follow those and go down the list.
Absolutely. You're not going to clean everything every day. For example, you will wash if you've got a cooking kettle, just something that anybody could understand what it is. Every time you use that, you have to wash that. But you probably are not going to wash the ceiling or the light fixtures or things like that every day, because it takes ladders and depending upon how big your facility is, maybe a forklift or some type of lift to get to the top to clean it. But you do have to have a schedule to clean those things, because if you don't, you're going to find that there's a problem. Whether it's the most basic would be insects. The most insidious might be you get condensate up there and bacteria grow, and if one of those happens to be named Listeria, that's going to drop down in your product, and now you've got a problem.
And is there something to where, let's say if you miss the scheduled, the weekly or whatever, the actual scheduled point, you can't say, okay, tomorrow we'll come back and do double, or is it not really work like that?
Well, unfortunately, bacteria build what we call biofilms. If you want to think about them in another term, that's a bacterial bunker. And biofilms start forming in about 8 hours. And it takes a lot more to remove a biofilm than it does to establish it in the first place. And so if you do a shortcut on cleaning today, you're going to have to spend a lot more time tomorrow to get it back to the base metal or whatever material that your equipment is or plant is manufactured out of.
So would it be accurate to say it's easier or always preferred to take a preventative approach rather than a reactive?
Absolutely. It's easier to prevent a biofilm from getting established than it is to remove it once it's there.
Mm-hmm. So I guess this is sort of the inverse of the other question, and maybe the more fun one in a way. What have you seen people do wrong? Or are there kind of like frequent sort of,
well, not having the right temperature, not having the right concentrations, not having very poorly designed equipment. Flow rates are just, the list is as long as your arm and probably longer. There's a whole variety of different things that can go wrong. And, if you've got poor equipment design or it's improperly maintained, if a shield is supposed to be in place to keep food product from getting contaminated from other sources, and that shield is gone, then you've got a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess it's not necessarily extreme rocket science, but there is a method and everything to it, and you can't just be like this sort of, I guess it's this misconception that maybe some people have that when it comes to sanitation, like cleaning is cleaning. I know how to clean my house, so I know how to clean a facility. It's the same thing, but no, there's actual, I don't know if a science to it is the right word, but there's actual like.
There's absolutely science to it. It may not be rocket science like HACCP, but there is a science. There's a chemistry of cleaning. Right. There's a chemistry of the sanitizers that you use, and using them properly and in the right concentrations is important.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, in other words, you're not going to just wing it out there.
Yes.
Or you shouldn't. So when you set up the schedule, you sent us a slide about a master sanitation schedule. How does somebody set that up? And is that, I imagine it's always like for the particular products and facility, or how would you break it down?
Well, let's start out with list everything in your facility that needs to be cleaned. And that includes floors, it includes walls, it includes ceilings, and it certainly includes the equipment that you process with. But if you've got control panels, don't forget things like that. I mean, they can't get wet probably because there's electronics there or switches of some sort. And you don't, in your kitchen, you've got certain pots and pans that you plug in that you don't put in the sink to wash because it would destroy the electronics or the electrical heating element or something. And same way in your facility, you've got things that just you don't want to get wet. And so you take care of those by wiping them down and protecting them from water as you're cleaning the rest of the facility. But everything should have a schedule. Maybe it's every day, maybe it's every week, maybe it's every month, or maybe less frequently than that. And you just take a look at what your exposure is. What happens if I don't get this clean? And if it's that you're going to get spoilage organisms or bacteria, pathogenic bacteria in there, then you better clean it more frequently and take care of it more closely. Mm-hmm. If it's something that is more peripheral, say a floor drain, for example, then you maybe clean that, in a different schedule, depending upon what your exposure is. If that floor drain is in an out of the way area, it probably doesn't need to be cleaned every day. But on the other hand, FDA has in their inspection manual, training manual for their employees, that for their inspectors, that if you have got, I believe it's 20,000 square foot or smaller ready to eat area, everything in that room is considered a zone 2, unless it's a zone 1. And zone 1 is direct product contact. Zone 2 is right next to that. And that doesn't seem fair, but that's the way the FDA looks at it. So if they find Listeria in a floor drain in a 20,000 square foot or smaller room, you've got a zone 2 with Listeria in it.
So when putting together these schedules or plans and what needs to be done and when, are there certain types of products that are more dangerous than others? Like, I mean, if somebody's, let's say, producing dairy products, does that require more vigilance? Or are there certain ones maybe where the stakes are higher? I don't know if that's the way to put it, but
yes, that's absolutely right. And what you're saying is true. Does your product spoil if it sits out at room temperature? If it does, it's perishable. Think of meat, think of dairy, think of things that are going to develop an off flavor and off taste if they aren't refrigerated or frozen. Thinking of like frozen pizza. You can let that warm up until you bake it, but it definitely needs to be kept frozen. If you've got ice cream and you let that thaw out, it's going to destroy the product from a quality standpoint. And but if you've got fluid milk or other things like that that you don't keep refrigerated, it's going to spoil, and somebody's going to either, at best, going to have a very bad experience in eating it, or at worst, get sick.
Mm-hmm. So it does depend somewhat, I mean, to a large extent, on what you're actually, I guess not all potential threats are created equally, to put it lightly.
Yes.
Yeah. So we'd also mentioned we were talking about something that maybe not everybody thinks about, and that's the sanitary design, like the way that instruments and machines and whatnot are built, and how that can make them easier to keep clean or less so. Could you go into that somewhat? What that entails?
Absolutely. That's one of the big things that you run into. And for example, if you've got a food contact surface that has a weld, let's say 2 pieces, if you can think of 2 pieces butted up, hard to see my hand, let's say in an L shape, okay? Right. And they're welded there. And but they are not welded. It's not a complete sealed weld. The food product will get underneath between those 2 pieces, and you can't get that clean. And if that happens to be a spoilage situation or a pathogen, you're in trouble.
Mm-hmm. So I guess when it comes to designing things to make sure that you can reach things easily, and they're not going to like comparing it to like the cracks in the couch or something. Things fall back there and they're just there. No,
Yes.
it needs to actually be able to get things out.
Yeah, I mean, they need to be taken apart so that you can get to it. You have to be able to see the soils so that you can clean them properly. You have to be able to, pull it apart. If it can come apart, you can scrub it and get it clean, and that's important. There are a whole series of design criteria. 3A, for example, is the standard for dairy products. And if you look up the 3A standards, they will be one set of standards. The American Meat Institute, if you Google the AMI, they will have design criteria, and they will show you a whole variety of do's and don'ts there. So take a look at those things. And maintaining the equipment. So if you're using a hammer to pound something in place, it's going to create a dent and maybe a crack. And now you've got a problem that you're going to have to deal with as long as you have that particular piece of equipment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because now that's creating somewhere that's going to be harder to clean, but also where things can, I guess, potentially fester.
It's going to be a crack or a crevice that is going to be uncleanable if it's not attended to.
Mm-hmm. What about the design of the facilities themselves? I'm just picturing, like, for instance, you'd mentioned allergens. Everybody sees on food packaging, produced in a facility that also produces things with nuts and things of that nature. How do you do that in a facility where it's got both things? Is it a lot of like kind of just separating areas hermetically or as much as possible, or what does that take?
Well, I've seen plants do a very good job. I was in one ice cream plant that you had to put on a different smock to go into an allergen room that had nuts, for example. They only produced nut-containing ice creams in one particular area. And if you went from that room to another room, you changed smocks. You have to make sure that you are not carrying things from one room to the other, from one line to the other. Pay attention to the little details of where the soils could be coming from. Do you have dust from allergen room that could get into the non-allergen room? That's a problem. And it's just a variety of little things like that could be an issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess knowing how the facility is built in order to facilitate, making it easier, obviously not harder to keep it clean and separate. How would you describe? I mean, obviously, the name gives some hint, but wet versus dry sanitation. What are the different processes, and I guess what is most appropriate for what sort of product?
Well, there are certain things, as I mentioned before, like a flower bin that you flat out cannot get water in. There are other things that you have to use water on, and you're still going to dry clean, get all the soils out of the area before you start. Then you're going to rinse off the equipment. In the case of a dry cleaning, you're going to brush off the equipment, maybe scrape it off, and then maybe some equipment in the dry cleaning gets taken to an area where it's wet cleaned, and then dried out, sanitized and dried out before it comes back. But wet cleaning, you rinse it off, then you sanitize it, and then you allow it to go back into production. Whereas in dry cleaning, you have to use probably a non-aqueous sanitizer, like an alcohol-based sanitizer that dries very quickly. But you still, or a wipe, they have alcohol wipes now that you can wipe down equipment. And That's the process that you have to go through.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So if you're looking at a company and at a facility and their sanitation needs, how much do you put the responsibility for that, I guess, upon the management or just the actual people, kind of frontline workers who are going to be the ones, carrying out these processes? Is it
Well, you have to start with the top management. And, if top management doesn't say sanitation is important, you've got a problem. And you can look at least two national recalls that have happened in the last 20 years where top management didn't say that, and they paid the ultimate price. Some are in jail. In another case, the company wouldn't exist if a big fan of the product hadn't swooped in and bought the company and started all over again. But if management says we are going to have it clean, it makes it easier for the frontline workers to get the job done because they know that they've got the support of management. And, management has to give the frontline employees the tools that they need, the equipment that can be cleaned, and the ability to get things clean.
How much time do you think needs to be spent on training, or how much time and investment in that when it comes to sanitation?
Well, obviously, you have to train your employees on what the procedure is. 1, 2, 3, 4 is what we do, and this is what we use to do that. And these are the tools that we use: the brushes, the pails. This is how we label things. And there's a variety of training that's necessary to get the job done. And if you don't train, give your 5-year-old son or daughter the ability to go and wash dishes and see how that works out if you don't tell them this is where you get the soap, but this is how you rinse it off and things like that. And I'm not comparing your employees to 5-year-olds, but unless you train them on what your expectations are, you're not going to get the results that you expect.
Yeah. With 5-year-olds, you're also going to want to manage those expectations because
that's correct.
I would say one thing about if you have 5-year-olds helping you do the dishes, one thing you will know for sure is you'll have a very clean floor. Not necessarily the dishes, but yeah, definitely it's not. And I imagine it's not something like you pop in like we don't pop in a DVD anymore, but like, here, let's run this one-time video, watch it, everybody saw it, okay, and then that's it. No, it needs to be reinforced. And
well, there are a lot of organizations will have tests on not a heavy-duty college exam, but what are the basic steps of sanitation, and what do we use to clean? What products do we use to clean this soil, and what products do we use to clean that soil? That kind of a thing. Right.
Definitely. So before we head out here, I had another question. We talk a lot. We work a lot in compliance management and training about compliance. And when I look at these compliance guidelines about hygiene and cleanliness and sanitation, I guess our question is, how do the two work hand in hand? In other words, if you have a good sanitation program in place, that means you're more likely to hit your compliance guidelines, and also, I guess if you're really on top of your compliance guidelines, then things are probably going to be better in terms of sanitation, right? I mean, is that how it works?
Well, I'll tell you, if an inspector comes in and you've got dusty floors, or you've got soiled equipment, or you've got things generally not looking well kept, he or she is not going to be very, very forgiving of things that are observed. On the other hand, if the inspector comes in and finds that it's neat, that employees are know how to wash hands and have clean clothing on, and are paying attention to the details, and when directed to pick something up, that they take care of it and then go wash if it's something that fell on the floor, go wash your hands afterwards. And they will be able to tell what the training is by looking at what your operation is. And if they see that you are operating in good condition, under good conditions, and trying to do the right thing, they are not likely to come down hard on you when they find some things. On the other hand, if things are not going well, they're probably not going to cut you a lot of slack.
Right. No, that makes sense. Straightforward enough. Well, I know there's a ton to say about it, but if you had to kind of pick like one kind of like guiding motto or kind of tip you have when it comes to sanitation to somebody who has to get it done, what would you say? I mean, there's a lot of ground to cover, but
Well, pay attention to the details and pretend that your kids or grandkids are going to eat off whatever you're making there, and that it is something that you can be proud of. If you have your facility that's inspection ready every day, you're probably going to be in pretty good shape. If your facility is not inspection ready every day, then you're rolling the dice.
Yeah, I think that plays into what you were talking about earlier with the always easier to take a preventative approach, like easier to prevent it from happening than to clean up the mess afterwards.
Correct.
Which applies to quite a bit in life, certainly. Well, David, this has been great, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. If you want to learn more about Rootwurks and what we do in terms of training and also education and compliance help for food manufacturing companies, go ahead and come check us out at rootworks.com. We have all types of tools like checklists, internal audits, all types of things for managing training, compliance, and safety. Our main platform is the Rootwurks Learning Experience Platform, the LXP. Very affordable and industry tested and intuitive system for managing managing training and also your compliance tasks, and just helping you build that safety culture in the workplace, which sanitation is such a huge part of it. So definitely go check us out there. We also have our HACCP certification courses now online, so definitely check that out too. And if you would like to see more about what Dave's doing, check out dfbconsult.com. That's where they can find you and your consulting services, right, Dave?
Correct.
Definitely. So go check that out. And also it was Creative Confectionaire too, definitely, because
if you're in the Twin Cities area, you can find us.
Definitely.
Minnesota.
Definitely. All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody. And David, thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure. Have a good day, everybody.
You too. Take care.